Okay, so good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar. My name is Barry Crosby, and I'm one of the communication officers for the Green Ear Hub project. I'm delighted to be chairing this session this morning as part of our new Career Pathways for PhDs and Early Career Researchers series. And before we begin, I'd like to briefly introduce the Green Ear Hub. The Green Era Hub officially began in September 2022 as a coordination and support action funded by the European Commission under the Horizon Europe programme. Today, the Green Era Hub represents 15 EU ERANETs, co-funds and self-sustained initiatives across the agri-food and biotechnology sectors. Together, we work to strengthen collaboration, share knowledge, and support research and innovation across Europe. Many of you will be familiar with our Breakfast Club webinar series, which we launched here in October 2023. And since then, we've hosted 6 very successful thematic series covering circularity in agriculture, biotechnology to advance sustainable solutions for the bioeconomy, sustainable food systems, precision agriculture technologies for a sustainable future, plant health and protection, and animal health and welfare. If you're interested in any of these topics, please do remember that all webinar recordings are now available on the Green Era Hub YouTube channel. Now, the series, which continues today, shifts focus somewhat from our previous investigation of these scientific themes to career development. The idea behind the series is to explore what lies beyond the lab, to highlight the wide range of career pathways available to science PhDs and early career researchers, and to provide real grounded insights from professionals who've successfully navigated transitions across academia, industry, policy, and civil society. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome our second guest speaker in the series, Dr. Yuliya Shakalisava, founder and CEO of biotech startup Exit071, which pioneers cutting-edge exosome analysis technology with applications in diagnostics, therapeutics, and emerging bio-based industries. With a PhD in analytical chemistry and over 15 years of international experience spanning research, management, and fundraising, Yuliya has built a hugely successful career that bridges academic discovery and real-world innovation. Her work exemplifies how deep scientific expertise can be translated into technologies that strengthen human health, agriculture, and sustainable bioeconomy solutions. Yuliya is a Mary Solodowski Curie Fellow and a recipient of the Women Tech EU Award, which recognizes Europe's most promising women-led startups, highlighting the impact and vision behind her leadership at Exit071. Beyond her entrepreneurial accomplishments, Yuliya is deeply committed to mentoring and empowering women in science and entrepreneurship, encouraging them to pursue bold ideas which have the potential to create meaningful societal impact. Her talk this morning, entitled Beyond the Lab, From Chemistry PhD to Business Entrepreneur and Biotech Founder, will guide us through her journey and highlight the lessons that she's learned along the way. If you have any questions for Yuliya at any point, please do feel free to submit your questions through the Q&A and chat function. Thank you all very much for joining us today. And with that, it's my absolute pleasure to hand over to Yuliya for her presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation, and I am delighted to share my story from chemistry PhD to entrepreneurship. I'd like to start my talk with this phrase, which I absolutely love. There are no wrong turns, only unexpected paths. To say this, when I was doing my PhD, I had no idea that 20 years later, I'll be doing business in science. And there was not one single decision that brought me to where I am now, but different circumstances, different decisions. And I would say there is nothing wrong about the path you choose. You always can make the best of it. So if I should introduce myself, and the reason I'm invited here, I am a founder and CEO of startup Exit 071. I have a PhD in analytical chemistry. I have a lot of research experience, management, and fundraising. And I love technology, and especially the impact that technology can make in everyday people's life. But it's not just that. I think my career path is also defined by the fact that I'm a mother to two daughters. And I do consider myself a citizen of the world. I lived in 5 different countries, and that gives me a certain approach to my career and solutions I have in everyday and bigger situations. So I had a very sort of straightforward education, bachelor in chemistry. I was born in Belarus. That's where I did my bachelor. I followed a PhD career path in analytical chemistry. But a few years later, I did this diploma in journalism and media. And that already told me, just a straightforward, this academic career path isn't for me. I was questioning all along. I wanted science to mean more for people in some way or another. Now I have over 20 years of experience, and I'm glad to say that a lot of my scientific and professional career was actually based in Ireland. It's my second home for sure. I have Irish nationality, the best experience, the best memories of Dublin City University, where I did my PhD. I actually worked a little bit on Jaggers, and I'm bringing this here. It was my first postdoc. However, pretty much at the same time, I was offered a position at Institut Curie in Paris, which I took because it was an amazing opportunity and it was my dream to live in Paris. However, I loved Ireland. I went back to do more research and I was a lecturer. So I was kind of already on this academic career path that maybe we're all somewhat set in pursuing of PhD. But things didn't plan out that way. And later on, I changed. I already switched the career to funding advisor, research officer at Dublin City University, which actually exposed me to a lot of diverse sciences because I wasn't only working in my area, I was working with humanities and computer sciences, and also to a lot of funding opportunities in Ireland and in Europe in general. This was also the period of my life when I had my children. And I guess later in this time, I started questioning because I loved research, completely loved research. And I think I missed it by the end of this time and I wanted to come back. I got really good at writing grants. So before my second baby was born, I decided to return to science, and I knew about these opportunities that Marie Curie fellowships provide this chance to come back to research after a career break. And so I got in touch with a professor in the Netherlands at Leiden University, where the area of expertise and technology was relevant to my experience. And I was successful in obtaining this Marie Curie fellowship. Because fundraising already was my second nature, immediately by coming in to Leiden University, I saw a big opportunity. With professor, we wrote another bigger grant because I thought we need more people to solve this technological challenge. And so for 4 years, I stayed in a research lab developing this technology before in 2021, actually taking it and spinning out as a startup. And you may notice 2020, 21 is the time of Corona lockdown. So there were also very special circumstances, but I think it all planned out really well for me, and I've taken decisions to start a company which I am still absolutely happy with. I also want to make a note, there were other opportunities in my life that some I didn't take because I didn't want to take, and some because I wasn't awarded this opportunity. So I applied to be an astronaut at the European Space Agency. And okay, there's 20,000 other people who applied for the same position. I didn't get it. But what I also try to say that actually your PhD experience makes you qualify for so many things. And being an astronaut is one of them. They do ask for research experience as an advantage. But roads not taken lead us to where we are. So now I will briefly introduce my startup to the audience. I think you're probably wondering about the name Exit 071. So Exit was the name of our academic project, exosome isolation tool. We all like these acronyms. And 071 is actually a call code of Leiden. If you want to call Leiden within Netherlands, you have to dial 071. And there's a lot of places in Leiden actually that have this in the name. There's a restaurant called Lab 071, so I was very much inspired. And I thought it was a good way for me to dedicate a startup to the place where this technology was born, developed, and in general, it's an amazing place for innovation. So with Exit 71, we are on a mission to revolutionize precision health by unlocking the potential of exosomes. Our proprietary technology platform, Exit, delivers efficient, high-throughput exosome isolation and will make an impact in biomarker discovery, liquid biopsies, drug development, and next-generation diagnostics. As I said, the startup started in academia. So here on the left is my co-founder and Professor Thomas Hankemeyer. So it was a very natural path for me to be in developing technology in an academic lab and taking it into commercial settings. And it wasn't, just at the end of my research or anything. This idea was, I was growing with it for 4 years. Entrepreneurship in Leiden or Netherlands is such a natural part of environment, and maybe especially in the academic group I was in. Professor Thomas Hankemeyer was already a founder of another very successful startup, organ-on-a-chip startup, Mimetis. So I was exposed to this quite early on. Of course, it was still my decision, but I've seen other people doing it successfully, and I've seen support that was here. So, it wasn't a one overnight decision. It was continuously growing into this decision path. So exosomes, why do we focus on exosomes? They have a huge potential for non-invasive diagnostics and novel therapeutics. Before I came to Leiden, I never heard of exosomes. I'm not sure if many people did, because it's quite a new, maybe 15 years, 20 years old field. And now it's booming with scientific evidence that exosomes do carry these biomarkers. They come directly from cells. They have the same proteins, RNA, and metabolites. And they're like molecular fingerprints of organs. And cells release them into body fluids, such as blood, urine, even tears. And that makes them an easy access for liquid biopsies. The molecules inside exosomes are very well protected by a double-layer lipid membrane, which makes this molecular material very stable when it's released in liquids like blood. And therefore, having this information directly from organ cell is absolutely invaluable for diagnostics, for drug development, and so on. But there's a challenge in exosome isolation. If you want to take these particles out of body fluids. You need to make sure you have just them and not other like lipoprotein or protein aggregates, because that will affect your molecular data. So people working in this area generally will come from molecular and cell biology tools, and it worked fine to a certain degree to provide data of some importance to this date. But we are analytical chemists, so it's a real interdisciplinary approach here, where we have different tools that people who actually use the biological knowledge. And the interesting story how this idea of applying our technology to exosome isolation started, it was because in my academic group, there was direct communication with doctors and clinicians who are actually, treating those patients or trying to discover mechanisms of disease. And we were having this meeting with an Alzheimer clinician, and she was saying, this exosomes still keep me awake at night. They could be our last chance to understand Alzheimer's. And this really clicked for me. This is where I saw that my technology can have a direct, very tangible impact in biology, medicine, and eventually in people's life. So we diverted our technology to the application in isolation of exosomes. And our solution to this problem is exit platform, where we want to achieve a complete workflow, sample in, like blood sample in, and biomarker data out. Of course, it involves a lot of steps, and automation is a huge part of it, but that's also a big thing in academic lab in Leiden. Is robotic automation is already implemented. But the reason it's all possible is because of this microfluidic chip, a core technology, and it's called depletion zone isotachophoresis. I'm not going to go into details because it's a hardcore science, but what I want to say, with this analytical technology, we provide a drastically different way to isolate exosomes because we use electrophoretic mobility. And this is the property that other standard traditional methods do not use. This allows for very pure isolation because it's microfluidic format. We can put it in high throughput, and to allow for this technology eventually to go to clinic and to analyze many biobank samples and patient samples. It's a patented technology, as you can see here. There was already a patent at Leiden University, and as a startup, I've licensed this patent from Leiden University, but also as a company, we already have a second patent related to this technology. So, and this is maybe a part, when I was pursuing my PhD in some of my research positions, I wasn't thinking much about it. I wasn't exposed to this. But when you are in startup, IP becomes like second nature to you. You always think about IP before publications. So this was the introduction to the company. Now I would like to maybe talk about why I made certain decisions to actually, take it into commercial settings. Why was entrepreneurship appealing to me? So I really liked that I had this ownership. It was my research area, my research idea, technology that I was very well familiar. I knew it like the back of my hand, and novel applications. And I could work with many different people. It's a technology platform. It's not going to just stop at one. If one, for whatever reason, doesn't work, there's so much more that we can develop and work on different disease areas, different biomarkers. I loved the idea of tangible impact. And that was maybe the difference for me, while I was just doing academic research, still on my PhD. Writing papers is amazing. I am a researcher and a scientist by my mind, but I needed to see the impact of this beyond the lab. Like, And this is the first time where I saw the technology will have impact, because clinicians do come and ask for it. It was a real problem. And then there was maybe a little bit of pressure. I felt if I don't do this, nobody will. Because, when you're doing PhD, you are so specialized in something, right? And I feel in my area, depletion zone isotachophoresis, if you go Google this, there's maybe 20 people who are experts in the world. And there's people in Stanford and then a little bit in Netherlands. And because I knew this works, because I developed this chip in academia and I knew it worked, I thought if I leave this, that nobody else will do it. It will take even longer time for somebody to restart it and do it. So I thought I have the best shots at making this technology work in commercial settings. And solving all societal problems, it was great. But at the end of the day, it wasn't when I was starting, but actually when I was preparing for this talk, this is where I realized, and I have to admit it, financial gain is something that drives me. And I think it's a very good point in my life where I came to this. I am very determined to make financial gain out of it, because this is the only way this technology will also survive. You need to make money. And I've invested so much in this that I want to be rewarded in a very good way for this. But what really, made this transition possible, if I would have to acknowledge it, I think it's actually the environment. I was in the right environment in the right time, Leiden Bioscience Park. If you ever travel to Schiphol Airport, this is the picture I took in Schiphol Airport. Entrepreneurs, do your thing. I think maybe it's now the time, or maybe it's the Netherlands, but entrepreneurship is such a natural part of this country in general and in science. So in a Leiden Bioscience Park, it's very well set up to support, to encourage the transition from science to entrepreneurship. If I didn't see the support, I think that change would have been much more difficult. And I don't know if I would have done this, because I was never trained for entrepreneurship. I was a scientist. And I still think the scientific knowledge and that background is way more fundamental in what I do than the business skills. The business and entrepreneurship, you can get trained. And I will show you later, I am still being trained on this. But having this scientific knowledge and the drive, the ability to explain this to people is the main attribute you need to have. And secondly, again, my children, I wanted to do meaningful things in life for my children. It's some people say, this is actually maybe not the best thing to start a company when you already have children. And maybe I will give you advice later on in life. It's true in many, many ways. But for me, it worked differently. I want my children to see that their mother is doing the work she loves, and it's a meaningful work. And it's working out well so far. My daughter was in the science class. She now starts middle school. She was the only person in the science class who named terms that even teacher never heard of. But this is just the fun part. Okay, I'm gonna now give you a window a little bit into my everyday entrepreneurial life. And you can compare this with what you already do during PhD and your academic life. So one new thing for sure, and I start with the new thing, is the business approach to science, right? You need to write a business plan or continuously think about business plan. There's a problem, solution. I've just focused on explaining this to you. But this is not something you haven't done in science during your PhD. You always write this motivation part of your paper or your talk, why you're doing this and why you provide your solution. You need to be familiar with market and an analysis of the market. And that's something new for sure, because that makes it very tangible. Who's going to pay for your solution? Does somebody actually need it? And it's not just research on the internet. There's a lot of talking to people and approaching people out of the blue or using your connection and getting this market insight from interviews, from talking to people. You have to be very well familiar who else is doing what you're doing in the same extent or in a similar field, always keeping an eye on competition. But again, it's quite similar to what you do in science. You're gonna always know what's another group, academic group that are doing similar stuff. Can I reference their work? Can we collaborate? And yes, competition is not only for rivalries sometimes, or can we combine our technologies together actually to provide a better solution? You have to think about finances quite a lot when you're running a startup, planning budgets and financial projections. But if you I think in a modern way, the way PhD positions are now structured, you have a lot of exposure to this. At least I would hope so. During my time of doing PhD, maybe it was less so. But what I see now, PhDs and postdocs are involved in financials of the project. I think that's also actually quite a point of Marie Curie fellowship. I had one. I had to plan my own finances, and we had a Marie Curie fellowship for an engineer in our company where we had to plan the finances. So that's not something unusual. It's a skill set you already have, maybe in a slightly different angle of it. Public speaking, as you can see in this picture, public speaking is my second nature. I did enjoy it, I have to say, throughout my career and during PhD. But if you don't have it, you will absolutely have to learn it. You cannot run a startup without public speaking. But it's a skill set you're already developing during the academic career by presenting to public. And I always encourage even my interns and master students to use every opportunity you have just to speak. Just get out there and speak. The more you speak, the better you get at it. Negotiations is something drastically new I've learned. And I know you do have a little bit of negotiations here and there in life, making a salary happen, or children as the best negotiators. But here is like such a heavy tool set that you need to have. I had to negotiate my license with a TTO, and that was really it was a different experience. Negotiations with investors, and I already have them. So this going back and forth, but I think it's also a very valuable skill set in life in general. And I did take training on this, but then, I applied that training in real life. That's when it really, made a huge difference. I still do a lot of research, but it's more like product development. So I love this combination of, there's still research going on in the lab. You could say I'm a group leader. There's a lot of research, but with a very tangible application. To say that I'm not in a lab anymore. However, I am still the most experienced person with this technology, and if needed, they call me to the lab, and I can give an opinion because I do have that in-depth knowledge. However, there are lots of other people now who are getting their hands dirty in the lab. And if you do lab research, I think by being an entrepreneur, you can keep that love with a very big meaning for it. IP, as I mentioned before, that is a very, very big awareness of IP while you're doing research in a startup. And already coming into Leiden University, I was quite aware. I was already a lot exposed to IP, but maybe it's not always tangible for an academic institution to patent something, but as a company, it's your decision that you make, and you see the real value that this particular innovation can bring. So, yeah, there's a different mindset. We don't publish. I mean, we have published now, but after we've patented the technology, and it's always confidentiality. You think that and it's actually it's a really interesting way to operate in research environment. I have a few other things that I'm going to talk in a bit more details, but the point I want to make here, I'm actually always learning new things. And I love this about entrepreneurship. You don't just do repetitive things, there's always something new. I want to make a big emphasis on networking. And it's not networking just where I am already in running a startup. Networking starts from PhD. And the people you work with, the conferences you go to, they come back to your life. And I am an absolute bright example of what's happening now. When I came to Leiden University with Marie Curie Fellowship, and I realized, hey, this technology takes more than just me. We need experts. For some reason, the logo is not showing up on my slides here, but I knew who could make this microfluidic chips for me. It requires clean room experiences. I know I didn't have it and it would take me ages to learn, and our facilities didn't have this. But in Dublin City University, I worked with Lisa. I called Lisa. She was now working in Sintef in Norway, and that was her primary job. So we got on the project together, and now Lisa is making my microfluidic chips. It's all about the people you know. In the startup phase, now we're scaling this microfluidic chips. So now we need plastic. And who do I call? My office mate from Institut Curie in Paris. Stefano is now director of Airline, a microfluidic company in California. It's all like, if you have them at shorthand, it makes it so much easier. And they're your partners, they're your collaborators, suppliers, investors, advisors. And to show that you have this network, actually, when you're starting a business for investors, it's a very valuable thing. Like, they know you're not doing it alone, that you have this network to reach out. So I would encourage to make friends, talk to people, go to conferences, and move around the labs. Fundraising, as I mentioned before, it was already my second nature, but in a startup life, every day is fundraising. And here I'm actually showing you the funding that I have for my startup. It's about 3 million now raised, and our runway is still for another year and a half. But you can see in the numbers here, it's small and big. It's whatever it takes. Because I think I already had that background in fundraising from my role as a research officer, it was easy for me. I was so familiar with this. Okay, learn a few more things because it's for startup, it's not for academic research. But I was writing, I was pitching. If it's not writing, it's pitching. It's your second nature, because you need money to run the company now. So this year we've got quite a significant investment, almost 2 million, to make a real commercial step. I hired 5 people. These people now, some bought houses, people make financial decisions, and it's all on me. There's a lot of responsibilities. So I keep going with fundraising, but also now we are going into commercial side of things. So it's also, sales. But until this point, before you can sell, is a lot of fundraising. But the good thing I guess this slide also shows there is a lot of money out there. There is financial support for startups. Team building. It's I guess it's not unique to running a startup. In some other jobs, you will have this, but for me, it was a special skill and period of my life when I started managing people and realizing what is my leadership style. And here is also maybe because there's lots of young people, but also at different stages of life. And it's what is the culture you're trying to bring here? And I have to say here that I think my Irish heritage, my time spent in Ireland, brought a lot to the way I lead people and manage people. To say there's a lot of fun. It's a very, very good atmosphere. And I think, and I hope the people are happy. And we actually have now a new Irish team member in our group. There's a few things I would like to bring a special attention while doing a startup. So when you quit your academic job and to do a startup, there's several ways you can be part-time and then full-time, but I know that the Dutch system doesn't really encourage, like there's a lot of problems with ownership, how much of the company you can own, right? And even for professors, it's only done minimal involvement. So there is this period of time when you quit your job and you start a startup. There's very limited amount of money you can live on. And this is something you either need to prepare for, or what I was thinking, if you're just finishing your PhD, if your life stage is young, you maybe need less money to live. And I think if I would have done things differently now, I probably would have done it straight after PhD if I had the right opportunity. I see around me here is a lot of young entrepreneurs, and I know why they're doing it. It's a good time to start. But I was still able to do this, and I had my own reasons why doing it in a later stage of life with children. But I would like to make this point, and it's an honest observation, and you should keep this in mind. Being busy like never before. I mean, you think you're busy doing your PhD, but startup is, and it's because it's multitasking. There's so many different things. Well, as a CEO, I'm doing it's not one thing, but even the CTO or engineer and other people who work in the lab, they not always just work in the lab. Sometimes I have to ask them, can you do this thing, please? There's many different skills involved. The business is always there. My deadlines are all yesterday, but it's a lot of fun. I don't complain about this. Criticism is a very interesting thing, and it's not new for you as doing PhD or being in postdoc. You submit your article, you get criticized. You give a talk at the conference, you've been criticized, but criticism while pitching for investors, it can be ruthless. It's something you really have to be prepared for. I don't even know how myself, but maybe that's something I've learned during my PhD and academic career, what I would be doing before I have a next pitch event. I actually will go to 3 different people and ask them, give me 10 minutes of your time, listen to my presentation and criticize me. Like, ask me the worst questions you possibly can. But I know those people are my friends, so, I won't take offense. And then I felt much more prepared for the actual pitching and the actual criticism. But there are events in life where it's really heavy. And I had this, when you think maybe this is the last time you are pitching. And then yet it turns out when they're most critical, they actually think this is really valuable. So there is another angle to this that I've learned. Anyway, something you have to live with. It's talked a lot about lack of motivation when things go wrong. I personally, I still have to say I haven't experienced that, but I love what I do. I absolutely believe in what I do, and I have people around. Don't get demotivated. You motivate each other, and when people in the lab, some experiment might not work well, then I motivate them. It goes around, but the lack of motivation at certain points, you have to acknowledge it will come there, but it's not the reason to give up. And I want to pay a special attention to this point of women in startups. And there's a lot of statistics around the EU, Netherlands, and Ireland. I'm sure women are underrepresented. And there's a lot of challenges. We all have to be quite honest. There's still a lot of investors who would treat women differently and ask them different questions for sure. As a woman, you would be asked, well, I was asked about, how would you deal with bad situation or with a challenge rather than, what are your forward thinking ways? But there's still a lot of support because I think we live in good times, not perfect times yet, but good times where this is realized, and society, like European Commission and other funding mechanisms, already there to support women. And I observe myself, this culture change is really happening, but it's still something to be aware of. Another thing is to say, and I'm only here knowledgeable, I guess, for the Netherlands and a little bit of EU. When you start this transition, you're never doing it alone. There's so many programs. I mean, if I thought that I would have to learn about business all by myself, there's no way I could have done this. And also, there's no way any investor will trust me, if I had to learn business after science by myself. But there's so many programs in Leiden in the Netherlands. They all teach you about this. There's incubators. There's competitions. They bring you to the US to show Silicon Valley how it's done, and maybe a little bit more about women leadership skills. Don't do it alone. If you decide to do it, there's plenty of support, and I'm sure also in Ireland now there's a lot of support for scientists who want to be entrepreneurs. So why do it? And I will encourage to do it. I will encourage you to at least consider this step after your academic career. There's a huge sense of ownership. And it was quite important for me to have this piece of technology work that I own, and it's my responsibility to bring it into the real life. There's a leadership, if that's what you're after. There's plenty of situations to lead a team, to lead a project. It's if that's the career path you want, this is perfect for you. Diverse skill set. I never stop learning. And I know I'm not perfect at many things, but I keep learning, and I have those opportunities to get better and better at those skills. I love working towards a big aim because I am also in a technology space, deep tech, and it's a platform technology. I love seeing that how this can contribute to more than one particular area. That really drives me. As you can see, I have endless motivation to work all those things. It's just really nice to wake up and go to work because you love your work. And I also think there's many opportunities. I'm doing my best, and everybody who is in startup world, you're doing your best, but still things can go wrong, whether it's due to investment or market situation. You don't know when next crisis happens. But there's still, with the skill sets you learn, I think there's so many opportunities. And I can just say that even on LinkedIn, I'm being constantly approached for jobs because of the skill set they know I already have. And I want to come back to this phrase that there are no wrong turns, only unexpected paths. So even if you've chosen this, for some reason doesn't work out, you can make so much out of it. That was the main subject of my talk, but I want to have one more opportunity, just maybe to reflect on, not the substance of entrepreneurship, but like everyday things that you should pay attention. I found this being very valuable for me. And actually, this is not something for entrepreneurship only. I've thought about it while being in academia, and I actually read a lot of books about Marie Curie life, and I made this connection. So I want to share this with you. Find a mentor. Like, don't do it for yourself. And I know, like, you probably have these programs. There's a mentor assigned to your project, and it's not necessarily your PhD supervisor. However, for example, I am so grateful to this day for my PhD supervisor from Dublin City University, Fiona Regan, and she was my mentor. There's so much more you can get from a person who is genuinely supports you, not just the science, but actually like a woman in science or just your career. And I'm trying to pay back now. I support all the students and people who work in my company, master students I supervise. I genuinely help them with my network to get for the positions, to get jobs. And advice you can get from a mentor who is looking from years of experience. The same was for Marie Curie. If not for her husband, she would have been doing what everybody else was doing. But a mentor can have this vision and say, well, maybe this is the next big thing. Don't do what everybody else does. Make friendships. So as for your PhD, but also in startups, you can't do this all on yourself. You need someone to go have a cup of tea or a drink with and complain. This is a psychological mechanism to cope with. And actually, I think I've learned it quite a lot in Ireland, and I'm trying to imply this in my work in the Netherlands. Have a good friendship network will help your mental health and ability to work. In academia and in startup, there's still a lot of repetitive work, but you can look at it as repetitive or persistent. So as what Marie Curie did. Her work wasn't always fun. And, I have students come in for internship to me. A lot of times they see this vision that I'm going to cure cancer in this internship. Probably we might make a great discovery, but on a day-to-day life, there's a lot of repetitive work, and that's okay, as long as you see how this contributes to bigger picture. Productive time and downtime. We can't work, no matter what the stereotype is of being in academia or in startup, working nights, you can't do it only working nights. You run yourself to death. You absolutely have to have downtime, but it's your way of doing it. Whether you work 9 to 5 and then you relax, or I sometimes work through the night. I have to do this. There are deadlines, but I do take my time to recover and have time and have downtime. And maybe one last thing that I have a very strong opinion on it. Before you start a company, you have to make sure that science is solid. I think while you're doing research in academia, of course you're doing your best to make sure the science is solid, but there is maybe allowance for an error. Marie Curie made errors, But before you take the science and you take the risk out of academia into a real world, you make sure you believe that science is solid. Because after this, we're talking about there's a lot of money involved, there's a lot of promises, and you have to be able to stand behind the science of what you're trying to sell. This is it. This is the end of my presentation. I hope it was useful, and I would welcome questions.
Yuliya, thank you so much for really engaging and thought-provoking talk. I think you've given us all a lot to reflect on, and especially around how researchers can recognize their strengths and navigate the opportunities that lie beyond the lab, as your presentation has shown. We now have some questions, so I'd love to open the floor to everyone joining us today. Please do feel free to pop your questions into the Q&A and chat box, and we'll get through as many as we can between now and the end of the hour. Yulia, just to get things started, I think I'll kick off things with a question of my own, if you don't mind. You were just kind of mentioning at the beginning of your presentation about your desire to see impact from your research. And also you kind of mentioned about the appeal of financial gain, which is, of course, is very natural. But I was just kind of wondering, was there any one specific defining moment when you realized you wanted to start your own company? You know, you just kind of didn't want to continue in academia or go down the path of industry. Was there any one defining moment that really made you kind of take that leap and take that jump?
No, there wasn't a defining moment. And I think what I was trying to get through in my presentation, and maybe that's what made a difference for me, I was like brewing in this environment, so these thoughts of entrepreneurship were just coming in from different angles. And before I knew it, it was just nature to me. It was natural next step. I think it's also quite a nice way of being in this environment, where this you don't question this anymore. Yeah.
Yulia, thank you so much. I just kind of wanted to dig a little bit deeper, if you don't mind, into the subject of women in science and entrepreneurship, which I think is fascinating and which I think will resonate a lot with members of our audience today joining us. I was just wondering specifically about the barriers that you think exist for women transitioning from academic research like yourself into entrepreneurship, and maybe how we can address these particular barriers.
Well, I think if there are barriers, they all just come from very stereotypical cultural settings that we all know about. There is nothing new. It's the same barriers as in academia. If women have children, will they take time off? And generally women, like I went through many courses on this and many like sessions and discussions. Do women think small, while men think big? Women in their budgets, for example, they spend less while men just go and throw money. But I don't think it's all this like black or white. This could be maybe at this moment of time, my budget, I spend less because I want to extend my runway and I actually think with this different set of skills. But now that I have more money, or I also spend because now I realize I want to go fast and fast. I have to say that I see the society change for sure. In Netherlands, the approach becomes quite different. And I see a lot of support for women now as well, really. And the fact that, I am persevering with the startup, having children after, quit an academic career, while I could have had a six-figure job. I think for many investors, the way they see it now, I got this feedback, that adds into their confidence. I'm doing it for a good reason, and they believe in me. So it's all, I think, about individual, but if you are with the right set of mind and skills, I think you will make it. And there's a lot of women support now. We have our women CEO WhatsApp groups. There's like events organized just for women CEOs. I love this. We share this situations. There's way more awareness. So I think it's a good time to be in this business.
Yeah, fascinating stuff, Yuliya. Thank you so much. And what advice would you give to women scientists who maybe have an innovative idea but don't yet feel confident taking that kind of step into entrepreneurship?
Well, if you don't feel comfortable yet, that's totally fine. But you can get yourself familiar with the settings. Start hanging out with people who are doing startups, who are doing an entrepreneurship. Do you know about Ireland? But I know in the Netherlands, now there are programs, especially for scientists, postdocs, for example, to take that step. So there is a financial support for you to do 1 or 2 more years at the university to work not just on your science, but the business as well before you make this step. So I would say look for these opportunities. And if you're still hesitating, that transition can be smoother. It doesn't have to be like mine, just all or nothing. There are mechanisms now where you can convince yourself whether it's the right thing for you or not.
Yulia, and just finally for me, what's next for you and Exit 071? What are you perhaps most excited about in the coming years? What are your kind of future plans?
I'm
If
absolutely
you can share it
excited
with us.
to start sales. So we are now developing our technology into more commercial. We're scaling up volumes that we can process. We bringing down the costs of microfluidic chips, and I'm super excited to start selling. First, we start services while we're still developing the product. Yeah, I would love to see. We already had one customer to start with. We have traction, but now we make this technology more ready for like proper commercial use. And I'm absolutely excited to see this happen. And then, I mean, few years, well, I don't know, 5, 10 years down the line, I would love to have an exit and to see a bigger company acquiring this technology where there's a bigger partner can sell the instruments with the right network, with the right support. Yeah, that's the plan.
Excellent. Yulia, the very best of luck with Exit 071. It's been fantastic just learning all about it and learning about your particular career path and journey. And we really appreciate you joining us this morning. And
Thank
so thank
you.
you so much for such an insightful and generous presentation. Um, I think you've not only really shared your own story of your journey, but also have offered some very practical and honest advice that I'm sure will stay with many of us after today's session. It's been a real pleasure
And
having you.
you're very welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn and
Yeah,
ask me
absolutely.
questions if you want. Yeah,
Excellent. Thank you. And to everyone who's joined us, thank you for your time, your questions, and your continued interest in the Green Era Hub Breakfast Club series. A quick reminder that recordings from all our previous thematic series are available on our YouTube channel. If you'd like to explore those topics further, please do so. We hope you'll join us again for the next webinar in this Career Pathway series, which is scheduled for Thursday, the 15th of January, which will feature Dr. Monica Mburu, who's a founder and CEO of Aflaish Wellness and senior lecturer at Dedan Kimathi University of Technology in Kenya, when she'll be speaking about her career journey from beyond the lab, from food scientist to agri-food innovation in academia. Until then, thanks very much, everyone, for joining us today. And I wish you all a very happy Christmas and a very pleasant New Year. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye bye.